Today, we're going to move on. Are you ready?
We're ready.
And we're going to talk about embracing forgiveness in the context of marriage. If you want to have a happy marriage, then you have to learn how to forgive and forgive very quickly. And I want us to begin in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 27, which we covered in the last program. And it says, neither give place to the devil. We saw in the last program that when you give place to the devil, it often results in strife. And when strife gets in, there is every evil work. And Denise and I shared that early on in our marriage, and I mean decades ago, we learned that when we would get into strife, one of our kids would get sick. And it took us a while to wake up to it, but we finally realized, you know what, there's some kind of a connection between strife and our kids getting sick.
And that one time that Philip put his hand in that hot coffee, and we were in strife right when that happened. And he got third-degree burns on his hand, and we had to stop and get his hand treated every single day. But strife opened the door for that accident.
And we really learned. And after that, one day, Denise and I were driving in the car, and I told you we were in a little tiny Isuzu iMark. I mean, it was tiny. Mm-hmm. With all of our luggage, we had a tape duplicator, a typewriter, we had all of our luggage. Paul was in the back seat. He refused to stay in the car seat. That was a great frustration. Philip was on Denise's lap. We were nearly joined at the hip because the car was so compact. And one day we got into strife, and I said, Denise, if we allow this, something's going to happen. We finally learned strife opened a door to every evil work. So you know what we did? I said, Denise, let's tell strife to get out of our car. We literally rolled down the window on both sides of the car. We said, strife, get out of this car. And we realized strife is a spirit. It is a spirit. And when you allow it in, it creates bad things. And we commanded it to get out of our car, and we developed a no-strife policy in our home. But when you go to Ephesians 4, verse 27, it says, neither give place to the devil. The word place is the Greek word topos. It describes a real geographical location like a door or a window or a crack. The devil's looking for some way to get in, so you've got to be sure that you give him no place. But then when you go to verse 29, it says, let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth. Well, I always thought that meant curse words. But the word corrupt is the Greek word sapros. It describes anything that is rotting. You don't have to speak curse words to speak corrupt communication. Corrupt communication is anything that produces rot. It doesn't produce anything that's good. It just produces rot. It's just corrupt. And he goes on to say instead, but that which is good to the use of edifying, that it may minister grace unto the hearers. And sometimes we just need to stop and ask ourselves, is there a benefit to what I'm saying? Am I going to take Denise higher, or am I going to take her lower? Maybe I need to find a way to represent my argument or represent what I'm trying to say. I need to repackage my words to make them a blessing and not something that's just corrupt and is going to produce something bad. And then it goes on and says in verse 30, and grieve not the Holy Spirit, whereby you're sealed unto the day of redemption. Sometimes you just need to stop and say, is this communication blessing the Spirit of God? Or is this grievous to the Spirit of God? You'll know. You'll know the answer. And if the way that you're behaving, the way you're speaking is grieving to the Holy Spirit, then you ought to stop it. If it's grieving to the Holy Spirit, it's going to be grieving to your spouse. And guess what? It's going to grieve you too. You're going to be sorry later that you talked like that.
But you have to do this on purpose.
It's very intentional.
It doesn't happen accidentally. You have to do this on purpose.
And the following verse says, let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice. Verse 32, and be ye kind one to another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake hath forgiven you. And do you know what I've learned? If you can just be nice, you're a pretty mature Christian. I am really impressed by people that are just nice. But you know what? That's a decision. you choose to be nice. And rather than put all of your emotion and spend all of your emotions in bitterness, and spend all your emotions on wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking, put it away from you with all malice. And he says, be ye kind one to another. Be ye in Greek is a form of the Greek word ginomai. A better translation would be in the process of becoming kind one to another, which means this is something you have to learn. You have to learn how to put on the brakes, and you have to learn how to reverse your action. You got to get involved in the process of becoming kind one to another, tender-hearted, and forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake hath forgiven you. And Denise, the word forgiving here would be better translated, are you ready for this? Gracing one another, as God for Christ's sake hath graced you.
Powerful.
Well, how many times have you ever just thought, I just wish somebody would give me grace in this situation? I just wish she would just give me grace in this. Well, in the same way you want somebody to grace you, sometimes the best thing you can do is just to grace somebody else. Just let it go. You don't have to correct every single thing that happens. Now, I'm a teacher, and so I'm one that wants to teach. I'm one that wants to put things in order. But you know what? Sometimes teaching is not the answer. Sometimes you just need to overlook it and let it go. You just need to grace somebody in their situation. Just grace them, just like you want to be graced. And it's powerful. And when you just grace somebody and just love them in spite of them, it is so powerful. It frees them to hear from God. It frees them to want to change on their own. And I want to give another verse, but go ahead, Denise.
You know, I'm thinking of Proverbs because it says that there is learning in sweet talk. If people are arguing, there's no learning going on. We have one son that says, if people are shouting at each other, nobody hears anything. And there's no learning going on. And that verse says to be tenderhearted. Now, to be tenderhearted, you've got to guard your heart.
Yes.
Because if that person is railing against you, you can't say, well, I'm just going to guard my heart against them, and they're not going to hurt me.
And they're thinking about how to answer back.
That is not a tender heart.
No, it's not.
That's a hard heart. And God didn't call marriage for us to be hard-hearted towards each other, but He called us to be tender-hearted toward each other. Marriage is not supposed to be like this. It's supposed to be like this. Understanding, supporting, giving grace to one another, and keeping a tender heart towards your spouse.
And gracing each other as God for Christ's sake has graced us, Denise.
Well, before you leave, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Also, we would love to hear how the Lord is moving and touching your heart right now. So be sure to comment below and then share this video with someone you feel needs it just as much as you did.